A very good morning to you and welcome to Morning Express. My name is Trix Ingado. Today on the show, as usual, we shall give you an overview of what's being covered in local and international press and then tell you about renting. We are going deep into that as an investment option, and the question you're actually asking you this morning on Twitter is, would you rather rent or buy a home? A very interesting questions for young people who are looking forward towards being homeowners. You need to be thinking very seriously about this given the economic times. What is more beneficial, renting or owning a home, or working towards owning a home? And Waithaka Gatumia of Centonomy shall be joining us in a while to help us understand more about this investment option. So stay tuned for that. But far from that, let's start off with international news and see what's making headlines across the borders. And the first paper, as per usual, is from Tanzania. We take a look at the Citizen. We're told this morning Amnesty International calls on Kenya to process Lima's request for asylum. Now, this is a local politician that has been in the country, a local Tanzanian politician who has come into Kenya seeking asylum, saying his life is in danger, and therefore his situation has been in limbo as threats of him being, shipped off back home are rife. So Amnesty International, human rights organization, has come into play and says that they should process his request for asylum, and this is in line with international law. It is his right to have asylum if his claim for of his life being in danger is quite is quite valid. So he has been released, and let's take a look at the next paper and see what's making headlines. The Daily Monitor tells us traffic paralyzes the Luwiro supporters mob as Luwiro supporters mob Bobby Wine. Bobby Wine is a local musician turned politician who is running for office. When you scroll down, there's more news from West Africa. We're told about President Alassane Ouattara, whose presidency has been validated by the courts after it being contested. And of course, they're telling us what the tally for coronavirus is in the region. Tanzania is at 509, Kenya is at 63,244, and we are having Rwanda at 5,222, while Uganda is at 40,574. The more news on that page tells us about how a watershed COVID-19 vaccine is proving 90% effective. And this is a story that you're going to find in many websites across, even in the local papers this day. Pfizer, an international pharmaceutical, has come up with a virus that they say is going to be over 90% accurate. Meanwhile, the WHO is urging caution as we look forward to this being a solution to the COVID-19 problem. Now, moving on to the East African, Amnesty asked Kenya to stop not to deport Tanzania's ex-MP. That's a story that we've already talked about. Safaricom profit drops 6%. I don't want to return to Tanzania. That is Godbless Lima saying. That's the politician that we have been talking about. Now, next is Rwanda Today. It's leading with schools reopen, but where are teachers to meet a new normal? Now, this is the Rwanda Time as opposed to the usual Rwanda Today. Now we have Wakigali recreational projects are ready for private investors. Far from that, we're told about COVID-19. Mr. Shiaka warns of another lockdown, and this is a situation that has been trending the world over as current affected countries face second waves of the problem. Now, COVID-19, 13 tests positive in Rwanda's prison. Not very good, because we do know that prisons are typically congested. Far from that, let's take a look at the CNN this morning and see what they're covering. Of course, Trump's firing his defense chief could be the start of a wild 72 days running up to the inauguration. We have COVID-19 vaccine candidate is 90% vaccine candidate is 90% effective. This is according to Pfizer. That's the story that I was telling you earlier on. Why Xi, Putin, Bolsonaro and Erdogan haven't congratulated Biden yet. So these are international leaders that are perhaps playing it safe as they await for the situation in the United States to settle. Remember, you can be a part of the conversations here in studio by answering our question this morning. We're asking you, would you rather rent or buy a home and why? Trix Ingado, at Trix Ingado is the tag, and the hashtag to use this morning is KTN Morning Express. And now to look at the local papers is Agri Chabeda, a governance expert. Welcome to the show, Agri.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Now let's start off with that big story that I've teased from the international papers. It's on the front page of the Daily Nation this morning, as well as the Standard. We're told first COVID-19 vaccine offer 90% protection. Now the Standard says this morning their first effective vaccine can prevent more than 90% of people from contracting the coronavirus disease. A preliminary analysis shows the vaccine has been tested on 43,500 people in 6 countries, and no safety concerns have been raised so far. Now, on the Daily Nation this morning, it says new COVID-19 vaccine offers hope, but Kenya is cautious. What's your take?
I think, first of all, I think it's very positive news that a vaccine is on the market that can prevent the COVID-19 and treat it, much as we have not yet been told, for example, how long it will be effective for. We are not sure how exactly it works, but I think it's positive news. I think the more bigger concerns are how quickly this vaccine will trickle down to countries like Kenya, Africa, and the rest of the world, because I am sure there will be big competition from the big countries to try and take hold of it. I have read in other places that there is a plan to guarantee a certain number of those vaccines from reaching the market. When it gets here, we hope that it will be available at an affordable price, or it will be free. Otherwise, it might again, within the country, be used in a selective manner where those who can afford or those who are able to have the influence will get it ahead of the general population. But it's only good news.
Okay, it's only good news. Now, the Daily Nation is telling us this morning that this is coming as news soaring cases across the world have forced millions of people back into lockdown. And pockets of Kenya have also been affected by this current trend, whereby we're seeing a new, of course, this is attributed to some carelessness on part of the people and of political leaders, but we're having places that are far away from the typical Nairobi, Mombasa hotspots that have registered new, waves of the coronavirus, with hospitals being overwhelmed. So when you see this, that virus, that vaccine might be a far off thing, something that we can look forward to. But locally, what do you think we can do to ensure that this is something that we can handle ourselves as we await that?
I think locally we must keep vigilant. We must continue maintaining the good habits that we've been advised to. Hygiene, clean hands, social distancing, avoid crowded places. I think that has to continue as we move forward, and not begin to think that the vaccine will be a cure. There is nothing better than good hygiene to maintain good health. The other thing about the vaccine is we don't know whether it will affect different age groups in different ways. So I think until that happens, I think we focus on the protocols that are in place.
Yeah, now we're having first-hand accounts on page 10 of the Daily Nation about what it felt like for this particular person to having had coronavirus. He says, upon arriving at hospital, my body felt like it was no longer mine. So you can read up on that and see what it felt like for this person to be handling the coronavirus as an infection in his body. But far from that, when it comes to the African Union and other bigger bodies that are meant to look out for the good of Africa, what do you think should be done to ensure that we get that virus, we are prioritized as much as any other country or any other continent insofar as getting this vaccine is concerned?
I think they already have, various bodies have already done, especially not just the African Union, the World Health Organization. It has been in talks with Pfizer and other countries to ensure that a certain percentage of that vaccine, as it's being manufactured, because it will be in short supply at the beginning, that a certain percentage actually percolates to these countries. To me, the challenge will be, once it is here,
yes,
how will it be administered? The other challenge which I have seen with this vaccine is that it is supposed to be kept in temperatures of
Yes.
below 80 degrees centigrade. This is going to pose a very big challenge.
Even with the
countries.
with other vaccines, it's usually a problem because they go bad before they get to the remote parts to the people that need them. So, I do agree with you. That's quite that's a big concern. So,
yes.
Do you think it's a matter of forward thinking, planning before it gets here? What action would you love to see?
I think the action is the basic health infrastructure that we have. The governors, again, and the counties, they must get their hospitals up to scratch. And for example, a level 5 hospital will have to really have facilities for cooling that can keep vaccines at the temperatures that are required. Otherwise, what will end up happening is the vaccine will be packed in places where the temperature requirement can be met, and it will not be readily accessible to the country and at large.
Yeah, hopefully that can be something that the Ministry of Health looks into, is particularly in the arid and semi-arid areas where people are moving and migrating. They might be here tomorrow, next week they're not. Tomorrow or next week they're not. But far from that, there's an article here that's quite interesting. On page 8 of the Standard, Magoha takes a swipe at scholars and researchers over the coronavirus. Education Cabinet Secretary George Magoha has faulted university professors and scholars for doing very little in terms of research and in aiding in fighting the coronavirus. We do know that KEMSA has been working hard and is actually a part of some of these trials, but he is feeling like some of the people in academia are not doing their best to contribute to a solution to this problem. What's your take?
I think my take is, for many, many years it's been known that the amount of research funds in the universities has been dwindling. Part of the reason is the government has not been giving especially the government in universities sufficient funding for research. Private sector also perhaps could do a little bit more. But without meaningful amounts of money in that field, I think there is very little the lecturers and the professors and the dons can do other than basic research. I mean, I've seen him saying things like they should tell us the effect of masks on, and I think that's not the kind of research that is going
to play the devil's advocate here, we are having the CS saying that the world over, people are able to pitch research ideas to organizations that can fund them. So that element of not having enough funds to conduct research, to him, does not hold any water.
Well, he himself has been a don at the University of Nairobi, and I think he knows better than anybody else the challenges that are faced. So I'm not trying to really be an expert here, but I have seen over the years the research capacities of these institutions diminishing to the extent that a lot of our very, very able professors and dons are limited to teaching. And the research side then is really hampered.
Yeah, because typically even the teaching must include some of the discoveries that you make through research and experimentation and, surveys and all that. So, but the gist of his concern is that the lack of research has led to the production of substandard goods in the country, and of course we are not doing as well as we could in that area. So take a look at that. There's another personal story, the blind more likely to get virus as they rely on touch. That's a very good story on page 9 of the Standard. Take a look at that and see what it says, and see how this pocket of our society might be more vulnerable to the coronavirus as opposed to the rest of us that can actually see our way around. Now let's shift gears to local politics. Here we have on the front page of the Daily Nation that we're told Raila yields to Ruto BBI demands, whereas allies of both Raila Odinga and President Kenyatta have previously slammed the door shut on any suggestion to reopen and the report for amendments. The former PM yesterday promised pastoralist leaders that their concerns will be addressed. Will this pave the way for more changes by politicians and groups? And then the front page of the Standard says, race to save BBI. Merry-go-round is what they're calling it. President Kenyatta and ODM leader Raila Odinga cast a net wide to win support for handshake Youth report and tame allies jostling for power. It says senators push for clout and governors want gender clause to on running mates change. Pastoralist demands additional resources to address historical injustices, while MCAs seek extra cash. For more details, you can look at page 4 of the Standard. Mr. Chabeda, what do you make of this story?
Yeah, I think I'd first go to constitution making and say that it's very, very difficult to change constitutions when there is peace. If we remember the 2010 constitution, much as it had been going on for over 10 years, finally came to fruition.
Yes.
I think partly as a result of the problems we had in the 2007-2008 elections. Coming down now to the BBI, we want to change the constitution, and there is a consensus by certain groups of people that it needs to be tweaked.
Yeah.
However, as you can see, every time now you open this thing for discussion, it's a Pandora's box. Everybody rushes in because everybody has something they would like to see different from what was there before. And this is what we are witnessing now. We had 1 year in which to look at the BBI. It's come, and now it's being effectively reopened. And I think we are going to see several changes that may end up finding that the BBI, by the time it's now presented to the public, it's a totally different document from the one that is currently circulating.
Yeah, and is that a good thing or a bad thing in your opinion?
Personally, I think it's not a good thing, because I think we need to discipline ourselves so that when a document is opened for changes within a certain time frame, it's done, and once it's closed, I think you move on.
But then their sense of democracy is accommodating different views. So wouldn't that be right to hope everyone who feels that this is not really addressing my issues? Let's talk about the issue of pastoralists, for example, and MCAs needing more money. And then we have these governors who feel like it is not right to have that gender clause included in the system of governance. Those one might say might be valid concerns. So therefore they should be accommodated. If this is the unifying document, then it should literally unify us by including all our concerns and addressing them.
I do agree, but it is also a fact that one cannot have a permanent, you cannot be in a permanent state of modification, and you can also not be able to include all concerns and leave this thing open forever. Even in democratic institutions, we have elections once every 5 years. The reason is people come and they tell you what they like to do, and then once they are elected, you give them an opportunity to put their ideas into place.
Yes.
So I would suggest that even if these changes are to be made, for example, we don't even know now what period there is for these ideas to come so that the document can be closed. And for as long as you leave it open, we could keep talking again for the next 1 year. And before we know it, the referendum may either not take place, or it may take place under a lot of acrimony and division. And that is exactly what we've been trying to cure.
Okay, so take a look at page 4 of the Standard and see what details are coming up with the BBI, the very latest, because this is a developing story, and we do anticipate that there will be more and more covered by the local press and here at KTN News for you as far as the BBI is concerned. On page 3, a young star, Elsa Majimbo, has been making waves internationally, particularly with the, with the coronavirus and, going into confinement. She took to Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and just on Instagram, and she was making the whole world laugh at a time where a lot of people were not laughing, and therefore this has culminated in her winning the E-People's Choice Award, which is an international award. So I think it's quite commendable that this is making it to the front page. Positive news right there. So take a look at page 3. I don't know if Mr. Chabeda has anything to say. Have you seen any of her clips, and what do you think?
Yes, I have, and I'm actually very impressed with a lot of her clips, but the kind of stuff that she's producing is actually addressing a lot of issues of a global nature.
Yes.
And it may not actually be as attractive to a lot of our local...
Not to a typical Kenyan comedy, but then...
Exactly. Yeah. But, and because of the kind of things she's been addressing, she has attracted international acclaim. I would personally urge a lot of our locals to look at her clips, and she's
and I think it's
very proud of her.
Yeah, one good example of the fact that comedy can transcend tribal lines and, your typical stereotypes. Actually, she actually looks at life and some of the things that we experience and maybe don't talk about all the time. But again, it cuts across, and that's why she is making waves internationally. Speaking of the international scene, we have Biden rolls up his sleeves as Trump still in denial of a poll loss. That is what's is on the front page of the Daily Nation. There's a snippet there. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden took the first steps towards moving into the White House as Donald Trump again refused to admit defeat and tried to sow doubt among the on the electoral results. He also launched a transition website, buildbackbetter.com, and a Twitter feed at Transition46. Now, Biden has hit the road running. He's even talking about what he's going to do in struggling against coronavirus that has basically ravaged the United States and cost them a lot of lives. So when you see these contrasting behaviors between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, what comes to mind and what's your opinion?
I think President-elect Biden is doing his best now to try and show the nation that he's trying to heal the divisions that have been there because of the election. He's quickly set up a coronavirus task force. He's beginning to tell us that he will listen to experts who will guide the way he will run things. We can't get away from the fact that in the background, President Trump has not conceded and in fact has said he's going to court. The latest is we've seen that Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, who has been his very, very staunch supporter, has actually come out and said that President Trump has a point and he should be allowed to challenge the election. I don't think very many people believe that he will succeed, but because the American system allows this sort of things to happen, it's going ahead. And going back to President-elect Biden, I think the message he's trying to show is that his style of leadership also will be very different from that of President Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at page 31 of the Standard, they're telling us about this, and they have outlined quite clearly, this is based on a report by the AFP, the efforts that are being made by the President-elect Joe Biden, who has taken the first steps towards moving into the White House in 72 days. It's going to be quite interesting to see how this one pans out. When you see this sort of thing that is happening in the U.S. that you would never imagine, because they seem to be the big brother in terms of democracy and acceptance and trust in the systems, what comes to mind? And I mean, what would that imply in terms of them being the beacon of, what is right politically?
I think on the one hand, it's come as a shock. A lot of people did not expect this kind of challenge to take place. However, on the other hand, I think for Kenya and I think Africa in general, I think we should look at the way the institutions work. There is all this talk of going to court, and there's really, the country is moving on. There is no upheaval. There is no people on the streets. There is, and it's the president who's saying he's going to court.
Well, they are, but not in a way you would expect.
I'd be very surprised if you had an African president who believed he had won an election going to court. It would always be the opponents who would be going to court. Yes. Yeah.
Now, while we're talking about that, he has fired, I think, his defense secretary and appointed a new one. All the while, they are expecting him to be leaving office. What do you think that implies?
I think that's very curious. For one, I think everybody has been expecting President Trump to fire his defense secretary from about June, July, when he defied the president. The president wanted the military to come onto the streets to get rid of, to control the protests. And the defense secretary basically, without saying no, declined to do so. But doing it at this time is very curious, because the only reason anybody I personally can see is he's trying to tell the Americans that I'm still in charge. No other reason, because there was no reason to really fire him when in 76 days he will no longer be the Secretary of State.
Yeah, quite interesting that would
Sorry,
be...
Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, that's quite interesting that he would actually make that call at a point where a lot of people would expect that he would be stepping out. But this is a developing story. We shall be keeping an eye on that as we move along. But let's go back to the question of the day. We are asking you, would you rather rent or buy a home, and why? This is the topic we are discussing on Your Money today. Like I told you earlier on, Waithaka Gatumia, CEO Centanomy, shall be joining us to tell us what it is and how we should do in terms of going towards owning homes, and perhaps some of the pitfalls we must watch out for. So I'm at Trix Ingado. The hashtag to use is KTN Morning Express. Tell us what you think. Would you rather rent or buy a home, and why? Get on Twitter. Let us talk about this and have a good conversation about it and learn more. But of course, thank you very much, Agri Chabeda, for being a part of Press Review. Going to take a short break. When we come back, we have that awaiting you.